Ever want to build a launch tube from Battlestar Galactica? That's what we're going to do in this video. Well, hey guys, and welcome back to another Interstellar Modeler. So you may recall from my last video that the next project for me was supposed to be the 2001 EVA pod, but I am postponing that yet again because I got sidetracked. That's going to happen when you have a 3D printer. If you don't have one, you'll figure this out fairly quickly. You'll go to these sites that have all these different files that you can print from, and something's going to catch your eye that looks cool, and you're going to want to put everything else on the back burner, and that's what happened here. I came across a file recently by designer L.J. Beng, I'll provide the link below, that allows you to build a replica of the launch tube from the original Battlestar Galactica. So as you can see here, the file contains all the parts necessary to build this replica, including the prep area, at least that's what I'm going to call it, where the fighter is positioned into place in front of the launch tube. It also includes a step ladder, as well as some flooring pieces for this prep area. Now, if you print this at 100%, it will allow you to print a launch tube that will accommodate the Mobius model of the ship, which is very similar in size to the monogram kit, which I think is 1/32 scale. However, something like that, as impressive as it sounds, and you'll see an example of it if you go to the link, it's going to be a fairly large display. So I am running out of display space, and so I decided to try something different here and build a small scale diorama of the launch tube and prep area. So what I did was I took the file for the entry port and sized it to the maximum allowable size for my print plate. This is now the original Mars printer. By doing so, you have to size it down to about 38%. As for the fighter, the file does not come with a Viper file. You have to search for a separate file and size it accordingly. So what I chose was this one by Misu Bisu, again placing the link below for you there. And I chose this one because it allows you to print the Viper in separate parts, which I thought would be easy for painting purposes. Now, what's interesting about this particular file is that the fighter is designed with the passenger compartment, so it's a two-seater versus a single seat, and I thought that would be cool to include in our diorama here because I don't have a replica of the two-seat fighter, just a single seat from Mobius. Alright, so before we get started here, let me go ahead and show you the parts that I have printed. So as you're looking at this, you're probably telling yourself, wow, that's quite a few parts there. But on display here are 40 parts. Just bear in mind, though, I did print some extras here just to have extras on hand. So let me just kind of go through these with you. What I've got here are the supports for the railings for the interior of the tube that go along the length of the tube. We've got supports here for that prep area where the fighter is going to be sitting in front of the launch tube. We've got detailing here for the sides of the wall on the interior of the launch tube, and these are pieces for the ceiling. This detailing goes below these side panels, and then what we have here are pieces that you put together for the sled that the fighter sits on. And you'll notice here this is a partial port. This is supposed to go in the middle of two complete ports, I believe, just to give you visibility into the middle section of the launch tube. However, what I'm going to do is construct 3 complete ports rather than using that. And the ports now are printed like this against the build plate, so one side is going to have no detail. So you need to combine 2 of them, and it's best to do that anyway because they do print rather thin. You can see they kind of curl. And this is a piece now that I've combined 2 of them into, and you can see it's a lot sturdier, and the detail now is on both sides. And these are the parts now to the fighter, and you can see, as I mentioned here, it is the two-seater configuration. And out of anything, this took the longest to print because I did position it this way on the build plate, and it took about 8 hours for it to print that way from one end to the other. Newer printers, because there are newer generation printers now available, would print that a bit faster. The wings were the only thing I really needed to have supports on. Everything else was just printed right up against the build plate. Now the holes at the bottom of these ports accommodate, at this size, a 1/8 inch rod of styrene. So that is what's going to slide into the larger holes, and then a 1/16 brass rod is going to slide into the smaller ones. I tried to find a 1/16 inch plastic rod, but I just was unable to do that, so we're going to use brass rods instead. Right, so the idea now is to combine all of this into a display that will be put into this here. This is a display case that I found at Hobby Lobby, It's meant to display die-cast cars or trucks. It measures about 15 inches, a little over 15 inches in length, and that's exactly what I'm going to need to accommodate the tube and the prep area. Now, the launch tube is meant to have a ceiling as well as the back wall, as you see there, but these are really thin. As you can see, they did curl a bit, so I'm going to be gluing these onto some styrene plastic for more support. And so what we're going to have then is the open area along this side with the walls placed here as well as the ceiling up here, and all that will fit into our display case here. I'm going to have some lighting so that you'll see the red and white lighting that is seen on the TV show along the length of the tube. And then I plan to position some lights over the fighter in the prep area. And over the fighter, I think I'm going to go ahead and display two LEDs. We'll be able to switch from red to white. Red, of course, to simulate the condition of red alert. So as I go along here, we'll see how this works out with this display case. For sure, we're using the bottom piece here for the base. I'm going to be gluing some styrene plastic onto that and put everything on top of that styrene. I'd like to have the cover be able to be removable, and that way we can protect the launch tube against dust and all of that. So let's go ahead and begin. The first thing I need to do is to combine the rest of these ports here, and then we'll begin constructing the tube to start with. So it was now on to assembling the sidewalls of the launch tube. I began by measuring out a piece of 0.40 styrene plastic sheet, and this was then partially scored. Doing so will allow the sections to remain attached while providing a bend that will conform to the shape of the ports. Once I was satisfied with the styrene sheet, it was time to glue on the panels. For this, I used 2-part 5-minute epoxy, so as to allow me time to position each panel properly before the adhesive set for good. And this turned out to be the right thing to do. Using clamps as I went along, the adhesive did its job and was solid enough after 5 minutes to move on to the next section. As you can see in this picture, it looks like it's going to work out according to plan. Alright, so here we now have the completed wall, and you'll notice there's a tiny little defect here, unfortunately, that happened during the printing process, and I saw the defect there, but this is on the lower section, and being mindful that this is going to be probably covered by the tubing that's going to be running along here, so I'm not really going to worry about that. I did put together all of the ports now. I have 4 of them printed, and I'm going to be working on hiding some of these gaps here. You're not going to be able to see most of this here, but the part that is visible, I did at least want to fill in those gaps. I did make an extra one here. This is, I think, going to go on the outside of our display case. We'll see how that goes. What I did was I started the printing process of another port, but I stopped it short, and this left it completely blank on both sides, and I just added my own detailing there. Alright, what I'm going to do next now is paint this black before applying the neutral gray that I'm going to be using for the base color, and that is going to be followed by some weathering with some MIG ammo solutions. Alright, I'm going to proceed with that and get you caught up here in just a minute. Alright, so now I've got this painted with a medium gray. You can see there's still a gloss coat there. I'm going to dull that down, but I used a combination of the MIG ammo solutions to bring out the detailing along here, and the Tamiya weathering kit to add some grime and some soot along the edges. The ports did kind of the same thing. Used the MIG ammo solutions to give some grime along the detailing there, make it look like it's dripping down. And then for the railings, I chose a darker gray to paint those. Okay, so to assemble the tube now, I fiddled around with this a little bit, and I think the best approach is to glue on the supports first, get those nice and secure, give that enough time to dry so it's pretty solid. And what I did was I widened up the holes. I made sure that all the holes are wide enough for the tubes that we're going to be using so that they will easily slide through with no resistance. So the hope is once everything is set in place, we'll be able just to slide those tubes through and trim them accordingly. So for the tubes again now, I am using a 1/8 inch rod for the larger holes, and I took 4 of these here and painted them with a light gray color. And then for the smaller tubes, and by the way, I was able to find some smaller rods here. These are 1/16 inch rods, and they fit perfectly for the smaller holes here. And I left 2 of them gray and 2 of them red. The red ones are going to be placed on the outer edges here. I was just looking through some reference pictures, and it looks like the tubes on the outer edges are red like that, and that's nice. It'll add a little color to the diorama. Okay, so wish me luck, and let's go ahead and proceed here with the assembly of our launch tube. Alright, so here we now have the assembled launch tube. Very pleased with the way everything turned out. And what I was most pleased of is that it really helped to make sure that these holes were the proper size for the tube so that when everything was assembled, they slid right through. I mentioned that at the start before showing you how this all went together, that I took the time to do that. And that's simply because, I fiddled around with it a little bit prior to gluing things together, and I did run across some of the holes that were a little bit more difficult to get the tubing through because there was just a little excess resin inside the hole. So I just took a drill on low speed and just drilled that out just to be sure, and again, it really paid off to do that. So if you're going to put it together, make sure you take the time to do that. You'll notice here on each side now I have the tubes clipped off, and just to hide that I'm going to take some styrene plastic and create a little bit of detailing there so that it looks more finished off. Alright, so let's take a second to pause here and talk about what I have planned for the diorama from here forward. So I took out the base to our display case just to show you again the concept here. The tube's going to be on one side here with the open area here that's going to be filled in with where the Viper sits. So as you look at the file here, you'll notice that it comes with 4 supports and a piece that represents a sled that the Viper is supposed to sit on. And I've printed out all those pieces and was ready to go. But what I decided to do was to Google pictures from the old Galactica series to see what I could come up in terms of some other ideas for the area around where the Viper is going to be sitting. And I stumbled across some pictures of the actual launch ramp that they constructed for the show, and it looks completely different. Now, I actually knew this going into this, but I really didn't think about it a whole lot. But the more I looked at those pictures, the more I thought, maybe I could scratch build something like that. So my first idea was to take some insulating foam, as you see here, and use my X-Acto knife to carve out a shape that I needed. And then I took some styrene plastic and used some 2-part epoxy to glue the styrene onto it, and came up with this basic shape here. So the next step now was to design the detailing that you see on the sides. And so if you look at this black and white picture from the TV series, you'll see the detailing I'm talking about. I figured I might be able to give it a shot at trying to scratch build something that looked like that. Before I got that process started, however, I decided to contact my friend Marc Fraley because he's been working on, he's actually been trying to learn how to create files for 3D printing. And he's done a few things with name plaques and a couple other things. So I decided to run this idea by him and send him some reference photos, and thought I'd ask him if he would give it a shot to design something like that. And he said he would, and this is what he came up with. He actually came up with a very good facsimile of that launch ramp. And this is a picture of the Viper kind of taped together here so you can see what it looks like. And I think it's going to turn out really great. So thanks a lot, Marc, for designing that. It really is going to add a lot to this diorama. He's just become really, really good at that. So big thank you to him. So what I have left to do now is I have to wait for some things for lighting, because with lighting what I'm going to do is attach a strip of styrene along here and use some Mega SMDs to light up each of these areas. There's going to be a red one, a cool white one, and a red one to give us that alternating color that we saw in the TV series. And then I am working on some other ideas that I think I could do to fill in the background here for this area where the Viper is going to be sitting. So I have to wait for a couple things to come in, so I think this would be a good time to cut the video here and end part 1. I know you probably want to it to continue here, but I do have to wait a little bit for this stuff to get in. So I will be posting part 2 here shortly. In the meantime, if you have any questions about this project, feel free to contact me here on my channel or at interstellarmodeler@gmail.com. This has been a fun project to work on. I hope you've been enjoying it so far, and I will see you then in the next video. Take care.